双语音标领航，注音阅读启蒙，叶兴阳有声读物。
Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions. Edwin A. Abbott, 1838 to 1926. English scholar, theologian, and writer. 2. The inhabitants of space in general, and H.C. in particular. This work is dedicated by a humble native of Flatland, in the hope that, even as he was initiated into the mysteries of 3 dimensions, having been previously conversant with only 2, so the citizens of that celestial region may aspire yet higher and higher to the secrets of 4, 5, or even 6 dimensions, thereby contributing to the enlargement of the imagination and the possible development of that most rare and excellent gift of modesty among the superior races of solid humanity. Preface to the second and revised edition, 1884, by the editor. If my poor Flatland friend retained the vigor of mind which he enjoyed when he began to compose these memoirs, I should not now need to represent him in this preface, in which he desires, firstly, to return his thanks to his readers and critics in Spaceland, whose appreciation has, with unexpected celerity, required a second edition of his work. Secondly, to apologize for certain errors and misprints for which, however, he is not entirely responsible. And, thirdly, to explain 1 or 2 misconceptions. But he is not the square he once was. Years of imprisonment, and the still heavier burden of general incredulity and mockery, have combined with the natural decay of old age to erase from his mind many of the thoughts and notions, and much also of the terminology, which he acquired during his short stay in Spaceland. He has, therefore, requested me to reply in his behalf to 2 special objections, one of an intellectual, the other of a moral nature. The first objection is that of Flatlander, seeing a line, sees something that must be thick to the eye as well as long to the eye, otherwise it would not be visible, if it had not some thickness. And consequently he ought, it is argued, to acknowledge that his countrymen are not only long and broad, but also, though doubtless in a very slight degree, thick or high. This objection is plausible, and, to Spacelanders, almost irresistible, so that, I confess, when I first heard it, I knew not what to reply, but my poor old friend's answer appears to me completely to meet it. I admit, said he, when I mentioned to him this objection, I admit the truth of your critic's facts, but I deny his conclusions. It is true that we have really in Flatland a 3rd unrecognized dimension called height, just as it is also true that you have really in Spaceland a 4th unrecognized dimension, called by no name at present, but which I will call extra height. But we can no more take cognizance of our height than you can of your extra height. Even I, who have been in Spaceland, and have had the privilege of understanding for 24 hours the meaning of height, even I cannot now comprehend it, nor realize it by the sense of sight or by any process of reason. I can but apprehend it by faith. The reason is obvious. Dimension implies direction, implies measurement, implies the more and the less. Now, all our lines are equally and infinitesimally thick or high, whichever you like. Consequently, there is nothing in them to lead our minds to the conception of that dimension. No delicate micrometer, as has been suggested by one too hasty Spaceland critic, would in the least avail us, for we should not know what to measure, nor in what direction. When we see a line, we see something that is long and bright. Brightness, as well as length, is necessary to the existence of a line. If the brightness vanishes, the line is extinguished. Hence, all my Flatland friends, when I talk to them about the unrecognized dimension which is somehow visible in a line, say, "Ah, you mean brightness." And when I reply, "No, I mean a real dimension," they at once retort, "Then measure it, or tell us in what direction it extends." And this silences me, for I can do neither. Only yesterday, When the chief circle, in other words our high priest, came to inspect the state prison and paid me his 7th annual visit, and when for the 7th time he put me the question, was I any better? I tried to prove to him that he was high, as well as long and broad, although he did not know it.
But what was his reply?
You say I am high. Measure my highness, and I will believe you. What could I do? How could I meet his challenge? I was crushed, and he left the room triumphant. Does this still seem strange to you? Then put yourself in a similar position. Suppose a person of the 4th dimension, condescending to visit you, were to say, whenever you open your eyes, you see a plane which is of 2 dimensions, and you infer a solid which is of 3. But in reality you also see, though you do not recognize, a 4th dimension, which is not color nor brightness, nor anything of the kind, but a true dimension, although I cannot point out to you its direction, nor can you possibly measure it. What would you say to such a visitor? Would not you have him locked up?
Well,
that is my fate. And it is as natural for us Flatlanders to lock up a square for preaching the 3rd dimension, as it is for you Spacelanders to lock up a cube for preaching the 4th. Alas, how strong a family likeness runs through blind and persecuting humanity in all dimensions. Points, lines, squares, cubes, extra cubes, we are all liable to the same errors, all alike the slaves of our respective dimensional prejudices. As one of your Spaceland poets has said, one touch of nature makes all worlds akin. Note, the author desires me to add that the misconception of some of his critics on this matter has induced him to insert in his dialogue with the sphere certain remarks which have a bearing on the point in question, and which he had previously omitted as being tedious and unnecessary. On this point the defense of the square seems to me to be impregnable. I wish I could say that his answer to the second, or moral, objection was equally clear and cogent. It has been objected that he is a woman-hater, and as this objection has been vehemently urged by those whom nature's decree has constituted the somewhat larger half of the Spaceland race, I should like to remove it, so far as I can honestly do so. But the square is so unaccustomed to the use of the moral terminology of Spaceland that I should be doing him an injustice if I were literally to transcribe his defense against this charge, acting, therefore, as his interpreter and summarizer. I gather that in the course of an imprisonment of 7 years he has himself modified his own personal views, both as regards women and as regards the isosceles or lower classes. Personally, he now inclines to the opinion of the sphere that the straight lines are in many important respects superior to the circles. But, writing as a historian, he has identified himself, perhaps too closely, with the views generally adopted by Flatland, and, as he has been informed, even by Spaceland historians, in whose pages, until very recent times, the destinies of women and of the masses of mankind have seldom been deemed worthy of mention and never of careful consideration. In a still more obscure passage, he now desires to disavow the circular or aristocratic tendencies with which some critics have naturally credited him, while doing justice to the intellectual power with which a few circles have for many generations maintained their supremacy over immense multitudes of their countrymen. He believes that the facts of Flatland, speaking for themselves without comment on his part, declare that revolutions cannot always be suppressed by slaughter, and that nature, in sentencing the circles to infecundity, has condemned them to ultimate failure, and herein, he says, I see a fulfillment of the great law of all worlds, that while the wisdom of man thinks it is working one thing, the wisdom of nature constrains it to work another, and quite a different and far better thing. For the rest, he begs his readers not to suppose that every minute detail in the daily life of Flatland must needs correspond to some other detail in Spaceland, and yet he hopes that, taken as a whole, his work may prove suggestive as well as amusing to those Spacelanders of moderate and modest minds who, speaking of that which is of the highest importance, but lies beyond experience, decline to say on the one hand, this can never be, and on the other hand, it must needs be precisely thus, and we know all about it. Contents.
Part 1.
This world. Section 1. Of the nature of Flatland 2. Of the climate and houses in Flatland 3. Concerning the inhabitants of Flatland 4. Concerning the women 5. Of our methods of recognizing one another 6. Of recognition by sight 7. Concerning irregular figures 8. Of the ancient practice of painting 9. Of the Universal Color Bill 10. Of the suppression of the chromatic sedition 11. Concerning our priests 12. Of the doctrine of our priests. Part 2. Other worlds 13. How I had a vision of Lineland 14. How I vainly tried to explain the nature of Flatland 15. Concerning a stranger from Spaceland 16. How the stranger vainly endeavored to reveal to me in words the mysteries of Spaceland 17. How the sphere, having in vain tried words, resorted to deeds 18. How I came to Spaceland, and what I saw there 19.
How,
though the sphere shewed me other mysteries of Spaceland, I still desired more. And what came of it 20. How the sphere encouraged me in a vision 21. How I tried to teach the theory of 3 dimensions to my grandson, and with what success 22. How I then tried to diffuse the theory of 3 dimensions by other means, and of the result.
Part 1.
This world. Be patient, for the world is broad and wide. Section 1. Of the nature of Flatland. I call our world Flatland, not because we call it so, but to make its nature clearer to you, my happy readers, who are privileged to live in space. Imagine a vast sheet of paper on which straight lines, triangles, squares, pentagons, hexagons, and other figures, instead of remaining fixed in their places,
move freely about,
on or in the surface, but without the power of rising above or sinking below it, very much like shadows, only hard and with luminous edges, and you will then have a pretty correct notion of my country and countrymen. Alas, a few years ago, I should have said my universe. But now my mind has been opened to higher views of things. In such a country, you will perceive at once that it is impossible that there should be anything of what you call a solid kind, but I dare say you will suppose that we could at least distinguish by sight the triangles, squares, and other figures, moving about as I have described them. On the contrary, we could see nothing of the kind, not at least so as to distinguish one figure from another. Nothing was visible, nor could be visible, to us, except straight lines. And the necessity of this I will speedily demonstrate. Place a penny on the middle of one of your tables in space, and leaning over it, look down upon it. It will appear a circle.
But now,
drawing back to the edge of the table, gradually lower your eye, thus bringing yourself more and more into the condition of the inhabitants of Flatland. And you will find the penny becoming more and more oval to your view. And at last, when you have placed your eye exactly on the edge of the table so that you are, as it were, actually a Flatlander, the penny will then have ceased to appear oval at all, and will have become, so far as you can see, a straight line. The same thing would happen if you were to treat in the same way a triangle, or square, or any other figure cut out of pasteboard. As soon as you look at it with your eye on the edge on the table, you will find that it ceases to appear to you a figure, and that it becomes in appearance a straight line. Take, for example, an equilateral triangle, who represents with us a tradesman of the respectable class. Figure 1 represents the tradesman as you would see him while you were bending over him from above. Figures 2 and 3 represent the tradesman, as you would see him if your eye were close to the level, or all but on the level of the table. And if your eye were quite on the level of the table, and that is how we see him in Flatland, you would see nothing but a straight line. Illustration 1. ASCII approximation follows. 1 underscore 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 2 underscore 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 3 underscore 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 backslash forward slash underscore 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 //////. When I was in Spaceland, I heard that your sailors have very similar experiences while they traverse your seas and discern some distant island or coast lying on the horizon. The far-off land may have bays, forelands, angles in and out to any number and extent, yet at a distance you see none of these, unless indeed your sun shines bright upon them, revealing the projections and retirements by means of light and shade. Nothing but a gray unbroken line upon the water.
Well,
that is just what we see when one of our triangular or other acquaintances comes toward us in Flatland. As there is neither sun with us, nor any light of such a kind as to make shadows, we have none of the helps to the sight that you have in Spaceland. If our friend comes closer to us, we see his line becomes larger. If he leaves us, it becomes smaller. But still he looks like a straight line. Be he a triangle,
square,
pentagon, hexagon, circle, what you will, a straight line he looks and nothing else. You may perhaps ask how under these disadvantageous circumstances we are able to distinguish our friends from one another. But the answer to this very natural question will be more fitly and easily given when I come to describe the inhabitants of Flatland. For the present let me defer this subject, and say a word or two about the climate and houses in our country. Section 2. Of the climate and houses in Flatland. As with you, so also with us, there are 4 points of the compass: north,
south, east, and west.
There being no sun nor other heavenly bodies, it is impossible for us to determine the north in the usual way, but we have a method of our own, by a law of nature with us. There is a constant attraction to the south, and, although in temperate climates this is very slight, so that even a woman in reasonable health can journey several furlongs northward without much difficulty, yet the hampering effect of the southward attraction is quite sufficient to serve as a compass in most parts of our earth. Moreover, the rain, which falls at stated intervals, coming always from the north, is an additional assistance. And in the towns we have the guidance of the houses, which of course have their sidewalls running for the most part north and south, so that the roofs may keep off the rain from the north. In the country, where there are no houses, the trunks of the trees serve as some sort of guide. Altogether, we have not so much difficulty as might be expected in determining our bearings. Yet in our more temperate regions, in which the southward attraction is hardly felt, walking sometimes in a perfectly desolate plain where there have been no houses nor trees to guide me, I have been occasionally compelled to remain stationary for hours together, waiting till the rain came before continuing my journey. On the weak and aged, and especially on delicate females, the force of attraction tells much more heavily than on the robust of the male sex, so that it is a point of breeding, if you meet a lady in the street, always to give her the north side of the way, by no means an easy thing to do always at short notice when you are in rude health, and in a climate where it is difficult to tell your north from your south. Windows there are none in our houses, for the light comes to us alike in our homes and out of them, by day and by night, equally at all times and in all places, whence we know not. It was in old days, with our learned men, an interesting and oft investigated question: what is the origin of light? And the solution of it has been repeatedly attempted, with no other result than to crowd our lunatic asylums with the would-be solvers. Hence, after fruitless attempts to suppress such investigations indirectly by making them liable to a heavy tax, the legislature, in comparatively recent times, absolutely prohibited them. Alas, I alone in Flatland, know now only too well the true solution of this mysterious problem, but my knowledge cannot be made intelligible to a single one of my countrymen, and I am mocked at, the sole possessor of the truths of space and of the theory of the introduction of light from the world of 3 dimensions, as if I were the maddest of the mad. But a truce to these painful digressions. Let me return to our houses. The most common form for the construction of a house is 5-sided or pentagonal, as in the annexed figure. The 2 northern sides constitute the roof, and for the most part have no doors. On the east is a small door for the women. On the west, a much larger one for the men. The south side or floor is usually doorless. Square and triangular houses are not allowed. And for this reason, the angles of a square, and still more those of an equilateral triangle, being much more pointed than those of a pentagon, and the lines of inanimate objects, such as houses, being dimmer than the lines of men and women, it follows that there is no little danger lest the points of a square or triangular house residence might do serious injury to an inconsiderate or perhaps absent-minded traveler suddenly therefore running against them. And as early as the 11th century of our era, triangular houses were universally forbidden by law, the only exceptions being fortifications, powder magazines, barracks, and other state buildings, which it is not desirable that the general public should approach without circumspection. Illustration 2. ASCII approximation follows. /////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////// door underscore forward slash backslash underscore 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 slash AB. At this period, square houses were still everywhere permitted, though discouraged by a special tax. But, about 3 centuries afterwards, the law decided that in all towns containing a population above 10,000, the angle of a pentagon was the smallest house angle that could be allowed consistently with the public safety. The good sense of the community has seconded the efforts of the legislature. And now, even in the country, the pentagonal construction has superseded every other. It is only now and then in some very remote and backward agricultural district that an antiquarian may still discover a square house. Section 3. Concerning the inhabitants of Flatland. The greatest length or breadth of a full-grown inhabitant of Flatland may be estimated at about 11 of your inches. 12 inches may be regarded as a maximum. Our women are straight lines. Our soldiers and lowest classes of workmen are triangles with 2 equal sides, each about 11 inches long, and a base or third side so short, often not exceeding half an inch, that they form at their vertices a very sharp and formidable angle. Indeed, when their bases are of the most degraded type, not more than the 1/8 part of an inch in size, they can hardly be distinguished from straight lines or women. So extremely pointed are their vertices. With us, as with you, these triangles are distinguished from others by being called isosceles, and by this name I shall refer to them in the following pages. Our middle class consists of equilateral or equal-sided triangles. Our professional men and gentlemen are squares, to which class I myself belong, and 5-sided figures or pentagons. Next above these come the nobility, of whom there are several degrees, beginning at 6-sided figures, or hexagons, and from thence rising in the number of their sides till they receive the honorable title of polygonal, or many-sided. Finally, when the number of the sides becomes so numerous, and the sides themselves so small, that the figure cannot be distinguished from a circle, he is included in the circular or priestly order. And this is the highest class of all. It is a law of nature with us that a male child shall have one more side than his father, so that each generation shall rise, as a rule, 1 step in the scale of development and nobility. Thus the son of a square is a pentagon, the son of a pentagon, a hexagon, and so on. But this rule applies not always to the tradesmen, and still less often to the soldiers, and to the workmen, who indeed can hardly be said to deserve the name of human figures, since they have not all their sides equal. With them, therefore, the law of nature does not hold, and the son of an isosceles, i.e. a triangle with 2 sides equal, remains isosceles still. Nevertheless, all hope is not shut out, even from the isosceles, that his posterity may ultimately rise above his degraded condition. For, after a long series of military successes, or diligent and skillful labors, it is generally found that the more intelligent among the artisan and soldier classes manifest a slight increase of their third side, or base, and a shrinkage of the 2 other sides. Intermarriages, arranged by the priests between the sons and daughters of these more intellectual members of the lower classes, generally result in an offspring approximating still more to the type of the equal-sided triangle. Rarely, in proportion to the vast numbers of isosceles births, is a genuine and certifiable equal-sided triangle produced from isosceles parents.
Note:
What need of a certificate? A Spaceland critic may ask. Is not the procreation of a square son a certificate from nature herself, proving the equal-sidedness of the father? I reply that no lady of any position will marry an uncertified triangle. Square offspring has sometimes resulted from a slightly irregular triangle, but in almost every such case the irregularity of the first generation is visited on the third, which either fails to attain the pentagonal rank, or relapses to the triangular. Such a birth requires, as its antecedents, not only a series of carefully arranged intermarriages, but also a long, continued exercise of frugality and self-control on the part of the would-be ancestors of the coming equilateral, and a patient,